Sounds good to me.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight we are on episode 201 and what to think about when you are looking for gear. So, a little backstory to this. Ben, as most of you know at this point, has now moved to the other side of the country, and he's finally getting out there, getting a little bushcrafting into his belts. He's doing some camping, seeing the scenes, looking the lay of the lands, having some fun. And the best,
Trying.
sorry,
I'm trying.
and the best part of this is you are getting some potential new people interested in bushcrafting, or at least they had enough interest to approach you to get kind of your input on how they would get set up. So, I mean, from that's a perfect resource to draw a little information from to try and talk about this topic because it's directly, fresh in your mind. And of course, you brought it up first. I'm just, putting words in your mouth at this point. But in any case, I thought it was awesome, honestly, because we have done this in the past. We talked about it, but I mean, it was coming from a couple of guys that had been out in the woods for quite a while. We hadn't, really gotten anyone set up at that point, minus the odd question. But you're literally going through the process right now, like the process where you are like, bushcrafting. How do I get into it?
Yeah, so that's the exact theory, I guess. What we're running with here is like somebody fresh hasn't bushcraft before, has almost no camping gear. What do they need to buy? What do they need? What do they want? What's worth buying? When you're looking at things, what do you want to consider? So it's easy enough to say, I want to go camping. I'll go to the, Walmart, Canadian Tire. I'll buy myself a tent, sleeping bag, a stove, and then I'm going to go camping. And the reality is, me and you know, when we go into, say, Canadian Tire and start looking for stuff, that there's stuff at Canadian Tire, there's stuff at Walmart we buy, but it's not always the right stuff to get started. You have to really be somewhat picky. And the first thing I want to start off with is you need to find stuff of a certain quality. And so, not everything is built to the same level of quality. And some of it, I think we would probably best say is more of a toy quality than an actual usable quality. And by that, I mean, it's really fun. You can set it up in a campground or in your yard. Your kids can play with it, and that's great. But if you're out there and you've walked 4 or 5 hours to get to where you're setting up camp, and it gets bad weather, your life could be dependent on that tent not leaking and collapsing in the middle of the night. Your life is fairly dependent on that sleeping bag being of a good enough quality that it's going to get you through the night without making it absolutely miserable or worse, literally you freezing.
Yeah,
Um,
and sorry, I'm just looking at the comments here, just saying hi to Tara Scout, Red Sand Adventures, and of course Red Bear Tactical joining us. And yeah, I agree. And I guess the first thought I had on that is, what are you going to be doing? Are you sure you are going to be bushcrafting, quote unquote, or are you going to be camping? Are you going to be car camping? Are you going to be glamping? You got to keep all that in mind as well.
so one of the things the individual I'm working with right now, or one of the individuals, sent me a picture of a tent from Walmart, and I took one look at it and I said, yeah, um, you'd almost be completely restricted to car camping with this particular tent. It's bulky. It's never fitting in a pack. Yes, it comes in a bag. So, like, from a layman's person who's never bushcraft before, it looks like a great deal. It's, and I've got tents like that. I've used tents like that. And from a car point of view, it's done me really well. Would I ever take it in the woods camping? No, it's too complex. It's heavy and it's bulky.
I
So
might have a
those,
small story to go along with just that thought, but I'm seeing if I can find a picture because a
yeah,
picture's worth 1,000 words. So if I
yeah,
accidentally jump in on you, it's because I found the picture.
yeah. So when I'm looking, these are some of the things I'm looking for. Like, how heavy is it? How bulky is it? How complex is it? Is it when I get back there? Am I going to be frustrated with the thing? Am I gonna, if something goes wrong, can I jury rig it so it still works? These are all things you want to kind of consider. Um, and you really have to, and this is, you mentioned it right there, where are you going? Because um, if you don't know what the terrain you're looking at is, the equipment you bring may not be ideal. And to sort of highlight that a bit, I went camping a couple of years ago with Jeremy, and he gave me a call and he said, I want to go camping at Dover Hills. And if anyone knows where Dover Hills is in Nova Scotia, it overlooks Peggy's Cove. So anyone who knows anything about Nova Scotia probably has heard of Peggy's Cove. And I think the best description these are granite hills. And if you've walked across granite, it's a lot of quartz and rock, and it's a very rough texture. It's basically, I don't know, 5 grit sandpaper.
Yeah, pretty much. It's abrasive in any way, shape, or form.
Right?
Oh, I found the picture. Keep chatting. I'm going to see if I can actually get this thing to flip up.
Yeah. It's thick and heavy, that it'd be really hard on some gear. It doesn't allow you to put tent pegs in, so you need a freestanding tent. You're going to need something to put underneath it to prevent your floor from getting ripped up. Otherwise, you're shortening the life of your gears. If you're going somewhere boggy or wet, you might want to consider a hammock, as long as you know you can have a place to suspend it, because you're going to be sitting up on wet ground. So you really have to know what you're involving. But there is certain gear that's more universal than others. And, a standby is always a tent. Me and you do have some preference towards a hammock, but we know there's a lot of places we go that we like hammocks, just not great for this. And there's places we wouldn't even consider taking a tent, because a hammock would be much, much superior.
And something I am now learning, though I do still prefer a hammock, sleep apnea. It's a real problem. It's not great in hammocks. Like, unless you are sleeping with people that do not mind you snoring, you're going to snore in a hammock if you got sleep apnea, because there's no way to get off your back. The most comfortable way to sleep in a hammock is to kind of lay in your back. Even if you got the best hammock on the planet, unless you get one of those literal flat lay hammocks, which is a whole other story, you're eventually going to find your way back onto your back at some point while you're sleeping. And as most of us know with sleep apnea, that's when the old, song log starts. And depending on how bad it is and how loud you are, you may find yourself woken up on the ground because somebody cut your guy lines. I mean, it depends. So that's something else to keep in mind.
I never cut your guidelines.
Oh, I know you wouldn't, but it is potentially a problem. As we all know, we know that one person that snores, and they literally snore loud enough they could, potentially wake the dead. To give you a small story on snoring, somebody in my family used to snore so loud that they were like several rooms away, and we hadn't stayed at this relative's house a whole lot, but we were staying there. That's a whole other story. But once again, we heard what sounded like wolves growling, to the point where I was woken up and said, "Can you go check this out?" And I'm like, okay, yeah, that does sound a little weird, and get outside and be like, no, that's coming from in the house. It's even weirder to find out it's this individual literally snoring 6 rooms down kind of deal with the doors closed. I mean, there's people out there like that. You know what I mean? So it is a concern potentially.
Yeah, for sure. So anyways, you have a picture you want to throw up. That
yes. So just the whole camping thing where you said the tent maybe not the most packable. And you can relate to this a little bit there, Ben. So you know where the waterfalls are?
Yes.
And the walk we had into said waterfalls, which we've talked about in previous episodes, it's not terrible, but it's not grand. Like, it's a little walk in with a fairly steep hill. So I took some people camping at this location. What's that?
There's rope involved.
There is rope involved. It's almost climbing at one point.
Yeah.
So these people wanted to go in and go camping, which was all good. However, they decided to take like one of those big double room 6 or 8 person tents.
Yeah.
And before we ever went in, I'm like, that might be a little big for this walk. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you want something smaller, because there's only 3 of them going and taking this tent. And they're like, no, we're all good. So they had their tent. They had foldable chairs, not like the pack-up camp chairs that you and I talk about, like full-on folding chairs, which never actually made it to the campsite. They fired those in the woods halfway down. But anyway, this, I know it's a little hard to see, but do you see how much sweat is on our bodies? This is what happens when you overpack for an area, and then potentially somebody has to come back and help you with that. It was bad, man. They so way overpacked. It was like everything but the kitchen sink. And, of course, trying to be the good host, I was like, yeah, all right, I'll give you a hand. How bad can it be? That's how bad it can be. That's improperly packing for the area you're going to. Not pre-planning, not following the advice of your guide. It can go bad.
So and like I can understand, like you see the pictures online and it's nice and big and comfortable, and you think, oh, that's exactly what I want. But yes, if you're walking back 5-6 kilometers, you're trying to get away from people. It's nice to have that lightweight, compact shelter, whatever it happens to be a hammock or a tent. It's nice to have options, and it's nice to have things that are going to be comfortable. Yes, you might not have the room in there, and honestly, like if you're not used to it, there's a few concerns that might come up with this, but we'll get to those. But yeah, you're looking for things that are decent quality. Just don't go buy the cheapest thing. But there are good bargains out there. There are things you can get that are economical, and they are findable. And we utilize a lot of tools for that. Me and you do. We look for sales at Mech, Atmosphere, Sport Check.
Even Amazon. Sometimes, like if you have the outdoor thing saved as one of your references, it'll tell you when sales are coming up on outdoor equipment.
Yeah. The Mountain Warehouse, I think, is one place local here I've been to a few times now. There's a ton of places you can go, and I think me and you have both said it. Never pay full price for a lot of this stuff, because almost invariably it will go on sale.
Somewhere, someone is having a sale on the exact item you want.
The other place I use a lot, and I'm on there constantly. I don't know if there's anyone who's on Facebook Marketplace more than me. I doubt it. And I don't buy a ton on there, but I'm always looking in there. If there's a product I'm interested in, I go in and I look, and I set up the search parameters. You can do the same thing on eBay and Kijiji and a few other things at Craigslist. Utilize these services, because oftentimes what happens,
Ben did it.
I did. What happens? What's very regular is somebody who's never done backcountry camping before decides to give it a try. They buy a $380 tent, get out there, think this is absolutely miserable, go back to the store like a year or two later, realize they're not taking it back. So now you're stuck with it. You have no idea what the value is. So you throw it on and you sell it for $100 just to get it out of your sight, because you're sick and tired of seeing it. It's something you bought, you kind of regret because you didn't enjoy it. Now you just want it out of your house. So you can pick these things up for a dream if you're willing to put up with it. Sometimes there's a broken pole or a tiny rip you have to fix, but a bit of tenacious tape or a cheap tent repair kit you can pick up on any of these other places, and you can have a $300 tent or $500 tent for probably $100, $50 if you watch the sales. One that right now I've looked at, and I've spoke to a friend of mine, Chris. He's had this one that is oftentimes a decent deal on Amazon. There's a lot of reviews on it. Is the Nature Hike Cloud Up 2. And I think I sent you a reference to that one.
I think so. Give me 2 seconds. I'll try and pull that up. But I think you might have sent it to my phone, so give me a sec to try and flip it over.
I searched that one up on Amazon this week. There was for most of them, or for one particular color, there was a $35 coupon or $34 coupon available. And if you wanted the purple one, it was cheaper again. There was no coupon. It was just cheaper. And you didn't find it on the Nature Hike page, but it is said sold by Nature Hike. So, yeah, $170. There's still a coupon on it. I can't quite clearly see it on
$34 coupon.
So it's still good, right?
Yep.
So that's one I actually ordered it for a friend of mine, and they're going to be getting it hopefully this weekend. And I think they're very excited to see it. And this is a very simple little tent. It holds 2 people, one person with lots of room.
And honestly, $200 for a decent tent, not a bad price tag. I know there's going to be people out there who's like, oh, I'd never spend $200 on a tent. But the reality is, if you are actually planning to do, real camping, and when I say real, I don't claim that people out there doing fake camping. I mean, like, you are going to make this a hobby. You are going to invest a significant amount of your time, your energy, your effort, your thought processes, your money into doing this hobby, $200 is not that bad for a good tent.
Yeah, how many people pay $30, $40 for a decent umbrella, right? So, you know, this one here comes in, I think, all told, taxes and everything at this price under $150 or around $150. So you take that, 34 bucks off. That's more or less a little better than your taxes or so. It's a pretty good deal.
What is it? 155.25. That's taxes in, delivered to your door.
Yeah, hard to beat it, really. Like that's a decent deal. There are cheaper tents on there. Some of them have advantages. I found one. It was a little over $50. It doesn't come with poles. It expects you to use tracking pole or your hiking poles, tracking poles. I liked that option, and I definitely seriously considered that as an option. But it does involve buying a set of trekking poles, and if anything happens to them, you're going to be cutting a pole. I thought that might be pushing it right now. But it is an option out there. You can save a few bucks and a few pounds if you. But I think that one comes in at about 4 pounds or less.
Yeah, it wasn't very much, be honest with you.
It might be 3.8 or 4.2.
I think I have it right here. Where was it? That's measurements. 4.6 pounds. That one specifically.
Yeah. So, relatively lightweight tent. It's hard to beat that. Similar story with, that's kind of what we got there. We've talked about some other things. So, a basic setup would be a tent, a mattress. I would go with one of the ultralight ones. There's a ton on Amazon right now. You can find they're either tube style or like honeycomb style or ball style, like each little pouches. They don't take a ton of air, and they get you off the ground. They give you some insulation. You can usually pick them up between $25 and $50. If you want an insulated one, you're probably looking at between $60 and $500.
Yeah, I mean, like most things, the sky can sometimes be the limit. But once again, do you really need to spend that money? It comes back to that, what are you going to do with it? If you're going to be an ultralight hiker, you may want to invest that kind of money. If you're going to be, like we said, you're going to be glamping at the back of your car, probably not so much of an interest to spend all that extra money to save a half a pound.
I mean, I've touted the advantages that I found with that Hibernate. I think I paid $69 or $70.
Yeah, I think that's all we played.
Insulated one. It's still available online. I find it relatively comfortable. I've been with other people who said they want ones with a little bit more gap. I'm going to tell you, anyone who's ever seen me sleep anywhere, I am the princess of the pea. And if it's an uncomfortable mattress, I am not sleeping on it. And I can sleep on this one. So if you can't sleep on that, then that's impressive.
That's impressive.
I'm pretty picky, so maybe you need.
I guess with all these things we talked about, something else that you can try if you are new to camping, and you're unsure of how much time you're going to invest into it or how far down the rabbit hole you want to go, reach out to some friends or jump on like one of the bushcrafting communities or something like that. And there's a very high potential. You can borrow a little bit of gear to try it a couple times. That way you don't drop, $300, $200 on a tent, $300 on a sleeping bag, $100 on a sleeping pad. And then like Ben said, you get out there and you're like, why am I paying to feel homeless for a night? Because I've heard it described as that. You know what I mean? Camping, pay all that money to act homeless.
Yeah.
I don't understand that, but I mean, that is a common conception from a lot of people. My dad, one of them, he was one of the biggest influences of me getting into bushcraft and stuff like that. Spent a lot of time in his woods, and he'll tell you straight up, I hate camping. My idea of camping is going to the Howard Johnson. You know what I mean? So if you are questioning if this is going to be for you, maybe borrow some gear or pick up some lighter gear, cheaper gear, used gear, whatever, and just stay close to the car. That way, if you don't like it, you got an out. Don't get 14 kilometers in the backwoods with gear and decide, I hate this. Because I can guarantee you in the middle of the night, that's not the time to try and walk out. And if you're just be like, if I can just get through it tonight, You're definitely going to have a bad taste in your mouth for the entirety of your life with this.
So you hit on a good point that I'm actually planning on utilizing. Although I am encouraging people that want to get into this to buy the right gear so that when they expand into it a bit more, they don't have to replace everything right away and they can use it. Is the first type of few trips we've always said this: test the environment in a safer, or the test the gear in a safer environment. Don't start your 30-kilometer hike with a bunch of gear you've never tested and have no trust in. That is a recipe to have a miserable time and end your bushcrafting or ultralight hiking trip um, for the rest of your life. Because honestly, if you push some of this gear to its limit on the first time, you may not enjoy it, and you may never be able to convince yourself that you can enjoy it. It does take some easing into, build that confidence um, with some easier trips.
And a note I had here, and it seems like a good place to put it in as any, is while you're testing this gear, you're going to find out that that sleeping bag you bought that's rated for -5, -5 is the extreme. Like, that is, you have long johns on with booties, and even then, you are going to not die. You're not going to be happy. You're not going to be comfortable. There's just a high probability you won't die overnight. Like, those are the extreme ratings, but unfortunately, a lot of manufacturers do push that. And we have talked about this in a previous episode, too. You can go back, look it up. We talked about sleeping bags. What they're advertising to you is generally what their extreme rating is, and that is not a comfort rating. That doesn't mean you're going to be snug as a bug. That is, yeah, you live to see another day.
Yeah. And me and you have both been miserable in the woods before. It is a miserable experience. Fortunately, our miserable experiences came after we had awesome experiences. So then we said, okay, we can adjust, and that's what we did. We said, okay, this worked, that didn't work. How do we bridge that gap? So yeah, your first few trips, don't decide that you're going to walk 30 kilometers in the woods on -30 degrees weather with the lightest pack you can possibly do, because you have not got the experience or knowledge to know what to do. And you're setting yourself up to fail. Take that gear, get used to walking it, but make sure everything fits. Make sure that you can get the gear, because here's something we've talked about backpacks before, and there's no point in going out and buying an 80-liter pack and then putting 75 pounds of gear into it, because you can squeeze it in there, and then not be able to walk to your car, let alone from your car. And
Might be guilty of this.
Right? But you can, and this is where I've heard people say, buy once, cry once.
Buy once, cry once. Yep. And Red Bear Tactical, I think I've heard him use that too, and that is true to some degree. Like, don't get me wrong, for some items, absolutely. If you're just learning or just getting into it, or you're on shore, might be a little leeway in there, but that's not to say go out and buy the cheapest thing either, because that's kind of the other extreme. I have nothing against cheap either. Big advocate for it myself, but after I know what I'm comfortable with. Where I know my comfort level is, then I don't mind skipping a little bit to see if I'm still going to get the same comfort, but I don't want to set my bar here and make that my acceptable thing. Once again, with Ben and I, perfect example is food. Ben taught me you don't have to eat like a chump while you're camping. You can eat good. You can have good food. My bar was set here. Ben made me pull that bar up to here. Now I eat good food. Like, you know what I mean?
And I mean, borrowing gear is a great option. The problem is, especially if you're relatively new to it, you probably don't have a lot of great connections that can loan you a ton of gear. And also, let's be honest, a lot of people won't loan their good gear.
No, you are definitely going to get your seconds, so to speak. Don't expect to be getting the best of the best if you're borrowing your Bushcrafters friend's gear or something. You're going to get the stuff they don't want to take into the woods, you know what I mean? Or they don't mind if it gets destroyed, which doesn't necessarily mean it's garbage. It just means it's probably been used and abused. And potentially they found some fault, not that it's a major fault, but the one they're currently using fills a need or a void the other one didn't quite live up to. So yeah, it's a little hard to get. Yeah, some outfitters rent gear, and that was another thing I was going to say, Scott. Was there is organizations, and Ben and I have talked to an organization in the past here in Nova Scotia, where you can actually rent some really good gear for not a lot of cost. And I can't. It was Nova something or other. Ben, you might remember them.
Yeah, I'd have to look. I had an email from them. We really tried to meet with them and sort of see if we could work with them, and I was excited to do it. Searching Nova is.
But yeah, there is organizations out there that you can rent gear, and it's good gear. Not just, the hand me downs and stuff like that. It'll be previously used or whatever, but it's decent gear, especially with this company we were looking at. It was good kit bags, good sleeping bags, good tents. Was it absolutely the top end of stuff? No, but it was far from bottom end. Like, it was stuff that I would be more than happy to go into the woods and enjoy a couple nights out with. And it wasn't overly expensive. I think it was like $100, $150 or something gets you literally everything. That's a sleeping bag, a kit bag, a tent, your stoves. Like, literally, you just bring your clothes and you and your food, and you're good to go. And they had different levels of that too. Like, I mean, whatever you wanted. And most of these companies will do that. Like, they'll have adjustable levels. You don't have to get everything, or you can get everything and plus more. There's a lot of selection out there.
Yeah, there are. So, and that group, I don't know if they did guided tours, but they did rent the gear for people who showed up, and especially right now. There's a lot of the airlines don't allow you to carry much in the way of luggage. It's kind of you pay extra for everything you carry on. So if you can fly to Nova Scotia, to Toronto, to Vancouver, to Montreal, and get an Uber to a local park or somewhere you want to do a hike, and you can rent your gear when you get there, you might actually be saving what you would have paid in moving luggage, right? And we know that there's stuff that's hard to ship on a plane, so that you're not shipping the fuel for your stove necessarily. They may stop you with other gear that you have because it's like you can't take your knives and stuff in a carry-on, which maybe is the only thing you're planning on doing. So it's got to be checked baggage. It adds a complexity that honestly we'd all like to avoid. So that's an issue there.
Red Sand and Scott also had a good point here. Thrift stores. Once again,
Yeah.
this goes back to if you're willing to put some time in and a little effort, just check her out at thrift stores. You would be surprised what I found here at Value Village. And that goes for belt knives to sleeping bags to backpacks. Tons of great stuff in there.
Yeah. Yes, very much so. And I meant to bring that up, and I don't know if I had it in my note. But yes, I've bought some awesome stuff through Value Village, Salvation Army. There's a few other Guy Frenchy type things. These are places where you can get all kinds of stuff, and you never know what you're going to find. The hard part with that, the thing to keep in mind, is don't go in thinking I'm going to get a sleeping bag or I'm going to get a tent. You go in thinking I might find something.
What's here today that might be interesting or I can make into something interesting? There's another option. You can buy a lot of stuff there that you can transform into other things. Cook gear into collapsible stoves to you found some leather to make pouches. I know somebody that went in and bought a leather briefcase and cut it all up, used the leather to make other stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh man, I bought 2 or 3 small leather coats and made a ton of leather camping gear. The back of a lady's, because the ladies section leather seemed to be a lot cheaper than the men's section. And so I went in and I just bought a couple of ladies' jackets. I didn't care if they fit. I got a couple suede ones and I made all kinds of gear. I have a little spice bag. It's just a square of leather that I fold up and wrap my spices in it to keep the things from breaking. I get the vials for it from the dollar store.
Yeah.
Right. So there's great gear you can get. There is certain gear I spend my money on. My shelter, my tarp, my hammock, my sleeping bag. Spend a bit of money on that. That is keeping the weather off you. That is very important. Sleeping bags. You need to know what you're looking at with sleeping bags. You can get them at thrift stores. Do a bit of research on your sleeping bags. A lot of them that you're going to get are going to be made of a cheap synthetic. That's not to say synthetic is bad, but there's quite the span of what's in there, and sometimes they're if they have children's figures on them, if they have funny little fins and stuff coming over them, they're probably not meant for backpacking. You'll notice the difference. Look for ones with good. Uh, I want to use the word valise or compression bag, so that when you
Mm.
put it in, you can crush it down into the smallest amount.
I have one hanging back there, but by the time I get it, I'll probably make so much noise it's not funny. But
Yeah, it's
yeah,
fun.
and it kind of goes back to that whole what are you going to do with it? And how much money you don't want to invest into it. Red Bear Tactical, my adventure bag, is my survival emergency bag that I grab every time I go to work. So I justify buying expensive gear because I usually hundreds of kilometers out of town, so it might be depending on good gear. And that's another thing. If you can double justify it, it does make the pill a little easier to swallow. You know what I mean?
Yes, and actually, Red Bear Tactical, I have something to send you on that. Um, I'll try to remember to send that on to you today. Um, yeah, that's another item I wanted to get to. So we already mentioned sleeping bags a bit. Again, try to look for some quality ones, things that compress small, lightweight, that have high ratings. You hit right on that. If it says minus something, realize that you probably want to add 10 degrees to that before you're going to find your comfort rating.
And
So
Red
a
Bear had
minus,
another comment there. Snug Pack gives 2 ratings, a comfort and an extreme. A
yeah,
lot of sleeping bags will potentially give you 2 ratings, but the one that's going to be big and in your face is going to be your extreme 9 times out of 10. There are some sleeping bags out there that they actually give you their comfort rating, and honestly, to me, that's kind of the better way to do it. Give the temperature where you're going to be comfortable and not just surviving. But I mean, there's other ways you can beef up your sleep system too. So, somebody new getting into this, you can be in the thought process that, oh, I have a $30 sleeping bag. But if I buy one of those, polyester liners, I think that adds like 10 degrees to your sleeping bag or something like that. And then if you get one of the silk liners or cotton liners, depending on your price tag there, that adds another 2 or 3 degrees. Like you can build up a sleep system and not spend a whole lot of money at it. Like those sleeping bag liners, I do fairly often see them at Value Village. You buy one, you take it home, run it through the washer 2 or 3 times, air it out good, make sure it's 100% dry. You got to get all the dampness out of your sleep system. You throw it in there. Now you're like 5 Fahrenheit sleeping bags, technically good for, -5 Fahrenheit now, which means you are going to be comfortable at that 5 degrees Fahrenheit again.
yeah, for sure. I've also used the trick of throwing a large body warmer, like a hand warmer, a bit larger. Throw in to produce a little bit more heat. It helps.
I only got
Um,
the small ones here. I tried to dig the box out, but it's buried under 2 or 3 sleeping bags, and I didn't want to collapse all that in the corner. But yeah, definitely.
but know your area, know what you're camping in. Sleeping bag is a really important one because they do have a temperature range where tents not so much. You'll see 3 season and 4 season and winter are the three things you'll often see on a sleep on a on a tent. So winter sleeping tents are designed for the winter. They'll more likely have snow skirts. They're usually double insulated, double layers. So it'll trap a layer of air in between. The ventilation in it is smaller, so it can hold the heat in, and it's designed to do well in the winter. The problem in the summer is they're going to build condensation in, and honestly, they will be warm enough that in the summer you probably would cook. A 3 season one is going to have more netting, have more ventilation options, and is going to be good for 3 seasons:
Hmm.
springs, summer, and fall. Um, all have their advantages in proper time, but with a sleeping bag, you get them for ranges, and in a hot summer day, all you need is a liner. On because me and you've both been out in times where you
You
just
sleep
didn't
on
want
the sleeping bag, not in the sleeping bag.
maybe one leg is in at a time, one leg's hanging out in an arm, right? And that's how you regulate temperature for a lot of the summer is by not covering all your body. You throw a piece out to control your heat, right?
The classic one for me is one leg comes out and on top, and
Yeah.
depending how much I need to regulate depends on how much that leg comes back in. More serious note, Steve made a great point here for anybody looking to get gear. If you're new to it and you're onshore or the woods in general, Steve said, given the option, he likes high visibility items for a variety of reasons, and he likes orange. And there's a big one. If you're not used to going out into the woods and navigating and things like that, and it's areas you're not really familiar with, you know, worst case scenario, if unfortunately you get turned around a little bit, it's way easier to be found. I know a lot of new people into this. They run out there, they buy camo, or they buy green, or they buy black, or things that aren't easily seen in the woods, which is nice. You can get out there, it's a lot of privacy. The problem is, if something happens and somebody needs to find you, you're way harder to find. You know what I mean? So weigh that with your options when you're buying stuff. I like high visibility gear when I go somewhere I'm not familiar with. If it's a place I've gone to a lot, then I don't mind taking the darker colors or the camo or whatever that happens to be on hand. But if I'm going to, like, even when I went out with Ben, just out past his lake, I grabbed my bright orange sleeping bag. Because for whatever reason, if Ben and I had gotten separated and I had my sleeping bag, I could open that thing and wave it around and scream like a madman, and somebody's going to see me.
Yeah, a lot of good gear is unfortunately camouflaged. And, you know, it has its time. And I often debate that. So a lot of my gear is more camouflage or green or neutral colors. I don't have a ton of the overly bright stuff. And I do like it. Like, this knife is blue. Blue is nice. Yours, I think, was red.
Yeah, reddish orange, which sticks out.
It stands out a little bit more. There's an advantage to that. Do think about the type of camping you're doing. If you're just getting into it and you decide you want to camp maybe a little closer to home, you may want to be pushing some into camping areas that maybe it's not as okay to camp in. Sometimes those camouflage ones allow you to stealth camp, or to avoid notice. And what I'm going to say with that, it truly is a big thing, is you don't want people noticing you and attracting attention sometimes. So the more subtle materials sometimes have an advantage. So the tent I was looking at, I could have gotten this person a purple one. I really thought about it, but because we thought there may be some chance, I'm sorry, people, but
well, you're adjusting there. Good point that Scott pointed out here. In the summer, he abandons a sleeping bag for a quilt. Quilts are becoming a lot more popular in general. A lot of people are abandoning sleeping bags just period to go for quilts, even in hammocks and stuff like that, because a real good under quilt and then a quilt on top is just as good of a sleeping bag when you are suspended in warmer temperatures. Cooler temperatures, you may want that, complete compression around you, or that complete, seal off around you. But even with a quilt, if you take it and you wrap it in and you fold it correctly, when I first started doing winter camping, I didn't do hot tenting, anything like that. It was literally just a tarp and 2 heavy wool blankets I would bring with a good ground pad. Funny enough, when I used to do like actual winter camping, a lot of times I did it by horse. My grandparents owned 2 horses. It was great to throw stuff on the horse. When I was younger, 14, 16, even 18, you got that feeling of being a cowboy. You could ride off into the bush, and it was kind of authentic. Don't get me wrong. It was like an old canvas tarp, but reality, I was still quite comfortable with that. You build a fire inside of a wedge tarp, you put your stuff up in there, and you can be quite comfortable. Quilts are a viable option for staying warm, providing you know how to use them, and you bring the appropriate quilts for the weather that you're in. Don't bring your quilt off your bed into the woods to go snow camping. It's going to be a bad time unless you've got one hell of a quilt on your bed. But you know what I mean? Just make sure you're weighing where you're going with what you're bringing.
I use one of my sleeping bags actually has an awesome foot box in it, and oftentimes I will just completely undo the zipper and treat it like a quilt because it works much better that way. It's a little tight for my size, zipped up, but unzipped, as a quilt, it works awesome, and that's what I use in my sleeping bag. And honestly, it works really good in the summer. You have a point. Usually, you can just tuck it in around your sides, but what you sleep on in a sleeping bag generally doesn't give you any insulation. That's going to be your mattress or your foam layer. So you're actually carrying a lot of weight that's not doing you much good with a sleeping bag. So there are options out there for that. Um, yeah. So we've covered sleeping bags, we've covered the tent, and we've mentioned the air mattress of some type. The foam is another relatively cheap option, and lightweight. The only issue it really has is the bulk.
I was gonna
But
say, what makes a hell of a sleeping pad? Silverwall off a house, which is like just styrofoam with that silver material over it.
yeah,
If you can get 2 or 3 layers of that, man, you sleep like with a little bit of cushion over it because it doesn't have a lot of give, but you'll never get cold.
no. Some people have made some interesting things. I actually took a piece of ripstop nylon. I bought it on Amazon, and I found a blue wool blanket. I actually have a piece of the blanket here. Um, but I took a standard size 100% wool blanket. I sewed all the way around the edges that vinyl. So now I have one size vinyl, one size wool. It acts as a ground sheet. When I'm standing by the fire, I can throw it over my shoulders, and it gives me coverage all over my back, right down to my ankles, basically. I can do so much with it, and it provides a surprising amount of heat because it prevents wind from going through it, so it almost multiplies the advantage of the wool with that windproof, waterproof backing. Um, and I didn't pay a lot for it. I mean, you can buy a wool blanket at any of these thrift stores we mentioned for $10 approximately.
They're going up in price a little bit. Well, at least here in New Glasgow, gone are the days of finding the $10 wool blanket. If I can find one for like $25, that's a steal now. You can buy them online brand new for like $80, and that's like the old Department of Defense wool blankets, which are, if they're good enough for soldiers, generally they're good enough for me.
If you're willing to go with an 80-20 blend of 80% wool, 20, I think you can still get them for much cheaper than that.
Yeah, if you want something that's a blend, like you said. And if anybody's wondering why we're toting wool, we understand it can be itchy. Some people don't like the feel of it on their skin. The reality is, wool is kind of one of those super materials when you're out there in the woods. It's fairly hard, or it's fairly resistant to abrasion. It's fairly resistant to sparks and embers. It still retains a lot of its heat value when it's wet. It's still kind of one of the basic standards. So if you're new to camping, once again, if you are okay with wool, that might be something you think about too. Keep an eye open for wool items or wool related items, even down to wool socks. If you can wear a good pair of wool socks, your feet may get a little warm, but less chance to chafe, blister, things like that. It's just not a bad material to work with. So we talked about a lot of things there, but one note I had here was lighting. So flashlights, things like that. I know a lot of people that first get into camping, they generally take a light like this, which is just your standard, flashlight, and maybe a couple glow sticks and think they're going to be fine for the night. The reality is, if you're going to get out there in the woods, you may really want to think about a headlamp. Headlamps are, my opinion, for what it's worth, one of the better ways to go when you're out there bushcrafting, because you can wear it on your head, it's looking exactly at what you're doing, and it keeps both your hands free. Headlamps generally come later as people go into the woods because they learn that, holding a flashlight and trying to put my tent up, or you get into this kind of deal, or, into your mouth, it's just not great. So you you throw a headlamp on, flap it down to where it's your viewing area, and off you go. And a lot of times, headlamps, you can pick them up fairly inexpensive for basic ones. You know what I mean? You can pay a lot of money too, and they have a lot of features. They're rechargeable, super bright lights, different colors, they flash, they strobe. But a basic one, like, I think I seen a Duracell one in Walmart for $15 or something. Just a basic one, turns on and off. You know what I mean? But a good starting point.
You can go to Costco and buy the Duracell ones occasionally. I think there's sets of 4 or sets of 3. And it's not that expensive even. I think it's like $10 you can't buy the batteries that come with it for the price you get the headlamps.
And I mean, LEDs have changed the world. Gone, or at least camping world anyway, gone are having the old yellow bulbs that, use D-cell batteries and last for an hour and a half. This here takes 3 AAA batteries. I'm pretty sure these are the same batteries I've had in it for like 3 years. I should probably change them out of worry of corrosion than not working.
Yeah. Same thing with mag lights. I remember a little 2-cell mag light that would last, 2 or 3 hours at best. Now you put the LED bulb ones in it, and you get like a week. It seems like they just last forever in comparison.
Or these flashlights that have like the multi. There you go. Like the different settings. There's a low setting on this one, which will double your battery life. Good features out there to keep an eye on, and it is worth thinking about these things. Lighting is important. It's very overlooked. People say, "Oh, I'll use the light from the fire," which is good and dandy until you got to walk 15 feet, 20 feet away from the fire where all your buddies are to go take a pee or something like that. You know what I mean? Ladies, even a little worse for you because you need to be able to see to maneuver and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Everybody, if you need to go number 2 in the woods, you need to be able to see what you're doing so that you don't end up a mess. It is very overlooked. It is one of the major things next to sleeping bags that I find a lot of people overlook. It's just a second thought. Oh, I got a flashlight at home. But is it a good flashlight to take in the woods? You know what I mean? Just because it's great at home doesn't mean it's going to be the best one for you out in the woods doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Flashlights are great. And like I said, the options you can get out there, it's pretty vast. Again, just look at something that has somewhat good quality. I kind of avoid the dollar store ones. They work good 80% of the time.
Tara just said something amazing, and I don't know why I didn't think off it. Sorry, Ben. Stop depending on your cell phone light. Cell phone lights are great for a quick light, but they drain your battery. They're not meant to be used as flashlights. They're meant for usually illuminating your pictures in your phones. All they're giving, your pictures and your videos, they're just giving you the option to turn it on and leave it on. It doesn't make it a good one. Red Bear Tactical says he uses O-lights only. I have an O-light here. I have no problems with it. Like I said, great flashlight. My brand of choice happens to be Streamlight. We use it in the fire service. It's much like O-light, the rechargeable stuff like that. So you don't have to brand marry either. I'm not saying that Streamlight's better than O-light. It just happens to be I can get Streamlight locally from a company here. McGregor's, you may know of it here. McGregor's Machine Shop. They sell Streamlight. They're a Streamlight retailer. And I can get some wicked deals in there.
I don't have an O-light. I've looked at them 100 times. I've been tempted. I just haven't pulled the trigger.
They're a good light. I am very happy I got mine.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I cringe at the price.
Well, that's kind of the problem. But to be fair, this is the O-light Baton 2. And I got it in purple because, actually, believe it or not, this was a test light. I think I told you about this before.
Yeah.
Anyway, the retail price for one of these is about $80 plus shipping and taxes and all that. And I mean, it's a nice small light. It's super bright, has a ton of features. I need to actually read the book again to remember what all the features are. But I have no complaints on it. But like Ben said, $80 for a tiny flashlight. This one here takes 3 AAA batteries. And honestly, brightness-wise, it's no worse or better. And I can take an extra set of batteries. Would I trade it for an O-light? Probably not. I do like my O-light. It has its advantages. But for the beginner starting out, I mean, this is a Uline special for, I think, $18. Actually, I got this free when I bought something from Uline.
Here's one that just happened to be on my table. It's police security light. Sells them at Walmart. Honestly, they're not the greatest light in the world, but this one's been left outside for 2 or 3 days. Found it again, picked it up, it still works. The lens has a small micro crack in it, and there's been issues, but you can get a solid light. Maglite is a well tried and trusted, and you can pick up a decent Maglite for $20-$30.
Yeah, I was gonna say those little ones we were talking about. I picked them up for work for like $23, and I buy them in bulk. So But like I said, don't overestimate your flashlight. Grab yourself a headlamp if you're going to go out there and pick one up. You won't be disappointed. So what have we talked about, Ben? We've talked about sleeping bags, shelters, lighting, clothing. Don't underestimate your clothing if you're new out there. Don't dress in layers. I'm sure you've heard this before. It's going to help you out a lot. It's easier to shed layers and keep cool. Don't sweat a lot. And it helps you pack some of it in, especially in like weather where it is now, where it's cooler. It's easier to take in. I wear an undershirt and then I throw a t-shirt over it and I put a long sleeve shirt over that. And then I might put a sweater over that and then a coat over that. Gives me a lot of options while I'm in there. And as long as I'm going fairly slow, I won't sweat a whole lot. You know what I mean? But maybe I don't want to wear the coat when I'm in my tent. Maybe I'll just wear my sweater. It gives me options and it's not my backpack.
And with clothing, I really want to emphasize this. Value villages, thrift stores, place are great options. But even I've bought a lot of stuff through Mark's Work Warehouse and stuff. You go in under sales, and you can get some amazing deals on a lot of the stuff. Look for stuff with little to no cotton if you can, simply because oftentimes it may not even get wet. Some of this stuff is so water repellent, it just gets hit and dries right back off, right? Some of it just beads off. Or even if it does get wet, it'll dry quickly. There are a few specialty things you can keep an eye out for. No Fly Zone is one that I've used quite a bit, that I've kind of had a liking to. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. The technical clothing that you can buy nowadays has stuff built in. A lot of them are UV protectant, so they're going to give you 100% UV protection for that all helps. So keep that in mind with your gear. But yeah, look around. You can usually pick it up pretty cheap.
Something you said right there that sparked another thing I didn't have on my cheat sheet here, but depending on when you go, if it's during the summer, which most new people or most people getting into bushcrafting are going to try and go during the better weather, which we highly encourage, because it takes one thing out of it. If you try winter camping as your first one, now you got to fight the elements plus try and do your bushcrafting. If you want to, all the power to you, but it is adding another level of complication. Rather, if you go in the summer, if everything all fails, you're probably not going to freeze to death. But you are going to need a couple of personal products. Once again, very easily overlooked when people go out in the woods. Throw that handful of baby wipes in a Ziploc bag and put in your backpack. Get yourself a small container of sunscreen lotion. Get yourself a small container of good bug repellent. The best bug repellent out there in the world is not going to keep 100% of the bugs away. So if you are bothered by bugs, look for, bug netting. You can get screen jackets and stuff like that that are going to give you great protection. They do hold a little heat in, so you are going to be a little warmer. But all things a lot of people will overlook. I can't remember how many times I've taken people out camping and have had to supply them with sunscreen, fly dope, and toilet paper. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm going to use leaves. We're going to a softwood grove, bud. Good luck.
Yeah. I think we're coming close to our hour, so I want to do a little bit of a summary. So again, look for quality goods, stuff that you're going to be able to depend on more than one trip. So buying like dirt cheap stuff that's just to try it may actually mean it's going to fail. It's going to cause us a problem. Look for something with a reasonable quality. Is there a place for cheap, low quality stuff? Yes. I use cheap tarps from the dollar store all the time as ground sheets. They fail, but I expected them to. They're just to help protect my other gear a little bit better. So there is exceptions, but generally look for good quality gear. Look for things that are packable. And by packable, we mean lightweight and not a lot of volume. Big, fluffy, heavy jackets and coats and sweaters and sleeping bags and tents, that's all going to add up, and it's going to get exponentially worse, and you won't be able to fit it into your pack. So look for gear that matters. I know some of our listeners here will tell you that with your backpack, make sure it's a good quality backpack.
Make sure it fits you.
And make sure it fits you. So it needs to fit well. It needs to be comfortable. It needs to be able to hold the gear you're going, and you need to be able to trust it. There's nothing worse than getting out there and having a strap break on your backpack or a seam open up, and all of a sudden you have maybe more gear than you should have that you can't no longer carry, and you're going to have to decide what else you want to lose because you can't get it all back. So a good quality backpack is is always something worth spending on. Think about the things that are going to mean the most to you when out there. What's carrying your gear, what's protecting you from the weather, and what's really helping you. You can shimp it out on other things and buy when you need it. Things like stoves, you can cook over the fire. You can go with no cooked food. You can do an awesome trip and never have to cook. There is options for that.
MREs are prime example of things like you can get MREs you don't need to heat.
Yeah.
Once again, just depends where you want to go with this. You know what I mean? I prefer taking the old steak and eggs and stuff like that now, as Ben has taught me. But maybe that's not your thing.
Yeah. But you can get yourself some good cookware, that durable cookware, and you can cook over the fire. You know, there's almost nothing you can't do with a decent small cast iron frying pan. You can boil water in it. You can cook up a steak in it. You can cook your eggs in it. You can beat an animal back with it in your tent with
True story.
So, you know, the next thing I want to bring up, do your research. If you find a product and you're unsure, Google it. See what people say. What have they used it for? Have they had any issues? If you find a product and there's absolutely no reviews on it, chances are either A, it's not the right product for the job, or B, it's not a good product and it's not useful. Or
I
C,
mean, there is the option, it's just too new.
Yeah.
But what's the company that makes it? You can review that.
Yeah. It's so brand new or so unknown that there's just no research. But if you're a beginner, that may not be your area you want to start on. Find something you can depend on to start, I think. Me and Robert might decide to take a chance on something new, but if you're a brand new beginner, you know, stay with the tried and trusted stuff.
Not tooting our horn, but Ben and I will talk about testing random gear. It's because we have gear that's okay now. We know where our comfort level is. Remember where I said setting that bar? We also know when to pull ourselves out if there's a problem. So if we get a piece of gear, we're like, oh no, but I'm not staying the night. We got to know how we're going to bail. Not just, oh, maybe this is how this works and I'll get used to it.
I'll take the good gear and then I'll take the questionable gear. And I'll try the questionable gear, knowing full well that if partway through it doesn't work out, I'm going to switch over to the good gear. And when I do a car trip, I'll often take a few extra choice pieces just to test it and see what it's like. It's fun, good times to be had by all. You know what I mean?
Once again, even with the cheap gear, Ben and I tested at home first, or close to home. We don't take it right out in the middle of like the back 40 where there's nobody around and go, oh, I'm going to try a $3 sleeping bag.
Again, do some research before you get out. The other thing is there's a ton of really good gear, choice gear that's readily available and easy to find. And I'm going to give you an example. Anyone who's looking, look up Mora knives. It's possibly one of the cheaper knives that you can buy, and I trusted 100% to take it and get me through a trip. I've taken my Moyer Companion and a few other varieties. All my girls have Moyer knives of different brands or different styles, and we've never had one fail. I mean, maybe they've nicked the blade, but I could give them the cheapest or most expensive knife in the world. They're going to chip a blade to some of the stuff they do. That's okay.
That comes down to user more than person. And I guess just a quick caveat, because I know somebody's going to ask this. Why didn't you talk about knives? Believe it or not, Bushcrafters may tell you otherwise. Your knife, especially if you're learning, is not your most important kit out there, or most important piece of kit out there. Bring a knife, yes, in case you need one. But don't worry about, oh, do I need the, XYZ with ABC features, and get the basics down first. That's why I didn't at least mention it during this. Just have a good knife that feels good to you. If it's a folding knife, so be it. If it's a fixed blade knife, so be it. Don't get so hooked up on what knife. That comes later. And then you can get into those, hour-long debates on what's the best. But starting off, in my opinion, not such a high concern area.
No, 100%. There are a lot of good knives that you can get. You don't have to spend a fortune on it. Have the right tools. You're going to need a knife for food prep, most likely. You'll need a knife to maybe cut some of your guidelines and stuff if you need to. Cutting rope, maybe doing some whittling and stuff like that. These are great activities to do while you're out there. No doubt about it. Is it essential to the trip? No. The big things are your sleep system for sure, your carrying system, and then your cook system. After that, I would get to the other things, because these are the things you do to really enjoy it and pass the time when you get out there. But let's get into how do you get out there and be comfortable. Once you learn how to be comfortable, then you get to do the other things, right? So I think that covers most of the stuff I wanted to get into. Again, really quick: quality, lightweight, low bulk, and sturdy material. And that's the stuff that's going to get you through looking for it. Do your research if you're unsure.
Yep, and couldn't agree more. So I think that pretty much wraps us up here tonight. Was there anything else you had to say there, Ben?
No, I think you wanted to do something
Yep,
special.
I'm getting to it. Just wanted to make sure we were done with this. So in a never before segment on the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures, by request, I had somebody at work request that I wish somebody a happy birthday. So there's an individual at work, only use first names here, Dan at work. This goes out to Mia from Ottawa. Apparently she's having a birthday. We'd like to wish her a happy birthday, and Dan asked me to sing her happy birthday. So here goes nothing. Anybody that is not tone deaf or is tone deaf, whatever, either way, you may want to tune out now. But regardless, to Mia in Ottawa, here we go. Happy birthday.
Mia, I don't know what you did to Dan to make him hate you this much, but
but here we go. So, going out to Mia in Ottawa, Mia, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mia. Happy birthday to you. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun. Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.